I drove by a cafe and saw my husband sitting by the window, with a woman holding his hand. I parked and walked in calmly. When he saw me, he turned white as a sheet. The woman looked confused and asked, "Honey, who is that?" I smiled and answered before he could, "I'm the wife." "And you?" "Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. My name is Beverly, and I want to tell you a story. It's my story. It's about how the life I thought I knew, the life I had spent 11 years building, was completely detonated on a perfectly normal Thursday afternoon in September. You see, a marriage doesn't just end. It dies. And sometimes, you're the last one to know you're living with the ghost. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. That particular Thursday started like any other. I woke up at 6, the alarm chirping softly. Sterling, my husband, was already up. He was an early riser, always claimed his best thinking happened before the sun came up. I remember the smell of coffee already brewing, a scent that used to feel like comfort, like home. I got the girls ready for school. Melody, my oldest at 8, was meticulously trying to braid her own hair, a look of fierce concentration on her face. April, my 5-year-old, was busy explaining to our bewildered cat that he was, in fact, a unicorn in disguise. It was chaos, but it was our chaos. It was normal. After I dropped them off at school, I settled into my home office. I'm a freelance graphic designer, and that day I was working on a branding package for a new local brewery. I loved my job. I loved the creativity, the challenge of taking an idea and giving it a visual life. I remember being stuck on a color palette, toggling between shades of amber and deep green, completely lost in my own little world. That's how normal the day was. It was a day of color palettes and unicorn cats. Around 3 o'clock, I wrapped up my work. I had promised April I'd pick up more glitter glue and some felt paper for a weekend project. She was determined to build a diorama of a fairy kingdom. So I grabbed my keys, hopped in my Subaru Outback, because, of course, I live in Portland, and what else would I drive, and headed to the craft store. I decided to take the scenic route, down Division Street. It's a beautiful drive in September, with the leaves just starting to turn. The street is lined with trendy restaurants and little boutique shops. And a coffee shop. That coffee shop. Stumptown. I was casually driving past, probably humming along to whatever was on the radio, when a flash of something familiar caught my eye. Through that big, picturesque plate glass window, I saw him. I saw my husband, Sterling. And he was holding hands with a woman across a small table. My first thought, honest to God, was, that must be a new client. It was a desperate, grasping thought. A life raft for a mind that was already drowning. Because the alternative was simply unthinkable. But this woman definitely wasn't his mother, or his sister, or anyone I'd ever seen at our backyard barbecues. There's a funny thing that happens in a moment of pure shock. Your brain does this weird, cruel trick where it processes everything in hyperdetail while simultaneously refusing to believe what you're seeing. It's a defense mechanism, I suppose, but it feels like torture. I saw her nails first. They were perfectly manicured, a professional, glossy nude pink color. Her hands looked soft. I saw his body language, the way he was leaning forward, completely engaged, his focus entirely on her. He was captivated. And then I saw his smile. It wasn't just a polite smile. It was the smile. The one I knew so well. The dopey, all-in, head-over-heels grin he gave me 11 years ago when he proposed at Multnomah Falls, with the mist hitting our faces and the whole world feeling like it was made just for the two of us. Seeing that smile, that sacred piece of my history, directed at someone else, it felt like a physical blow. The air was punched out of my lungs, and for a second, I couldn't breathe. I yanked the wheel, pulling my car over to the curb with a lurch. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were bone white. I just sat there, the engine humming. For maybe 45 seconds, maybe a lifetime, I had a full-blown internal meltdown. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. The sounds of the city, a passing bus, the distant siren, seemed to fade into a dull, muffled roar. All I could see was that scene in the window, playing on a loop in my mind. His hand over hers. His smile. Her perfect nails. Then, something inside me shifted. The hot, frantic panic receded, and in its place, something cold and hard and heavy settled in my stomach. The shock solidified into a strange, terrifying clarity. I was done crying before I even started. I did what any rational woman who just saw her world crack down the middle would do. I put the car in park, checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, took one deep, shuddering breath, and walked into that coffee shop like I owned the place. Let me just pause to paint you a picture of the life I thought I had, before this Thursday afternoon apocalypse. I'm Beverly Barrett, 35. I thought, a happily married woman. A mom to 2 incredible daughters who were my entire world. And apparently, a complete and utter idiot for believing my husband's endless excuses about late nights at the office and startup emergencies for the past 6 months. We lived in a charming Craftsman in Selwood that we'd renovated together 5 years ago. Well, when I say together, I mean I was the one who spent months poring over design magazines, who picked out every paint color, every tile, every light fixture. I was the one who argued with contractors over shoddy work and project delays while Sterling worked long hours to, as he put it, make it all possible. Portland in September is usually my favorite time of year. That golden afternoon light, the crisp, clean air, the ridiculous invasion of pumpkin spice everything. It was supposed to be perfect. Instead, it became the day I learned my marriage, my life, was a carefully constructed lie. I walked through the door, the little bell above it chiming, a sound that seemed both cheerful and mocking. The rich, earthy smell of roasted coffee beans was thick in the air, a smell I usually loved. Today, it made me feel sick. I saw them immediately, at a small table by the window, bathed in that golden light. Sterling saw me when I was about 10 feet away. His face was a cinematic masterpiece of horror. I watched it go through 5 distinct phases in about 3 seconds. First, there was confusion, what is Beverly doing here? Then, the dawning light of recognition. That was followed by pure, undiluted terror. Then, I saw a flicker of calculation in his eyes, his brain scrambling at lightning speed for a plausible lie. And finally, his expression settled on something between a deer in the headlights and a man about to have a coronary. The woman, the one with the perfect nails, turned her head to see what had stolen his attention. I learned later her name was Heather, because of course it was something elegant and romantic. She had this perfect auburn hair, the kind that looks effortless but costs a fortune. She was wearing one of those expensive blazers from Nordstrom and the kind of makeup that says, I woke up like this, but definitely took a solid 40 minutes to apply. She looked at me, a stranger interrupting her moment, then back at Sterling's pale, frozen face. And she asked him, her voice not hostile, just genuinely, innocently confused, Honey, who is that? Honey. The word hung in the air between us, a sweet poison. Before Sterling's mouth, which was opening and closing like a fish drowning in air, could form a single, pathetic word, I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that could curdle milk. And I answered for him. I'm Beverly, I said, my voice shockingly calm and steady. I'm his wife of 11 years. I paused, letting that sink in. The mother of his 2 daughters. I looked directly into her perfectly made-up eyes. And you, I let my gaze sweep over her expensive blazer, you must be the reason he's been working late every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 6 months. 6 months. The number just came out of my mouth, a piece of subconscious accounting my brain had been doing without my permission. It was accurate. That's when it all had started to change. When he stopped making it to Melody's soccer games, always with a last-minute work crisis. When he stopped asking about my day, his face buried in his phone the moment he got home. When he started buying expensive cologne I'd never smelled before, some fancy nonsense from Sephora that definitely wasn't his usual Old Spice. Heather's face drained of all color. And I mean drained. She looked like someone who had just been told their entire life savings was a lie. Her perfectly painted mouth fell open. "Wait, wife," she stammered, her eyes darting back and forth between me and the silent, frozen statue of my husband. He told me he was divorced. He said you two had an amicable split 2 years ago. Oh, this was good. This was really, really good. The sheer depth of the deception was almost impressive in its villainy. I actually laughed. It wasn't a sound of amusement. It came out a little unhinged, a little wild, but in that moment, it was the only honest sound I could make. Divorced? I asked, the word dripping with a sarcasm so thick you could taste it. 2 years ago? Is that why he's still living in our house? Is that why he's still sleeping in our bed every night? Is that why he's still taking our daughters to school every morning when I have early client calls? Every question was a hammer blow, and I could see Sterling physically flinch with each one. He tried to speak again, to form some kind of defense, but no words came out. What could he say? There were no words that could possibly fix this spectacular, 5-alarm dumpster fire he had created. Heather stood up so fast her chair screeched against the polished concrete floor. It was a horrible, grating sound. Everyone in the coffee shop, and it was packed with the late afternoon crowd of students and remote workers, turned to look. Portland loves its coffee shop drama, and we were suddenly the main event. She grabbed her Kate Spade purse, her knuckles white. She stared at Sterling, and her expression was pure, undiluted disgust. "You told me you were ready for something serious," she said, her voice shaking with a mixture of rage and humiliation. "You told me your divorce had finally freed you to commit to someone who really understood you. I broke up with someone for you. Someone decent, who actually wanted a future with me." And with that final, damning accusation, she turned and walked out, the little bell on the door chiming her hasty exit. I should have followed her. The smart thing to do would have been to turn around, walk out that door, get in my car, and drive straight to a lawyer's office. I should have left Sterling sitting there with his overpriced pour-over coffee and his mountain of lies. But I didn't. Instead, I did something else. I sat down in the chair she had just abandoned. It was still warm from her body, which was somehow the most bizarrely offensive part of this entire situation. I placed my hands on the table, folded them neatly, and looked at my husband. The man I thought I knew. 11 years, Sterling, I said again, my voice now a dangerous quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before a hurricane. 2 kids, a mortgage, joint tax returns, a life. We have a life. And you told her we were divorced 2 years ago. What I would discover over the next 72 hours was so much worse than a simple, sordid affair. Sterling wasn't just cheating. He was meticulously, systematically, rehearsing a new life. And he was funding it with ours. That night, he came home late, of course. He probably drove around for hours, trying to construct the perfect web of lies and half-truths to explain away the scene at the coffee shop. I was waiting for him. I had put the girls to bed, read them their stories, and kissed their foreheads, my heart aching with a pain so profound it felt physical. The grief was a giant, black hole in my chest, but the anger was a roaring fire, and right then, the fire was winning. It was a cold, clean anger. A strategic anger. When he finally walked in the door around 10, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open. The house was dark and quiet. He flinched when he saw me, like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "Bev," he started, his voice soft and placating. The voice he always used when he wanted something. "We need to talk. What you saw today, it wasn't what it looked like." "Really?" I cut him off, my voice devoid of emotion. I wasn't interested in his lies. Not anymore. Because it looked like you were holding hands with another woman and smiling at her like you used to smile at me. I didn't give him a chance to respond. I did some digging after I came home, Sterling. I logged into our online banking. I turned the laptop screen toward him. Tell me about these regular withdrawals. $500 here. $700 there. Dozens of them over the last 6 months. All marked business expenses. He stared at the screen, his face ashen in the glow of the monitor. The color, which had just started to return to his cheeks, vanished again. They were for the startup, he mumbled, not looking at me. Client dinners. Software licenses. That's funny, I said, my voice dangerously flat. Because they all went to the same account. An account I've never seen before. An account with only one name on it, yours. So I got curious. I clicked a new tab. I found a rental application. For a 1-bedroom apartment in the Pearl District. You know, one of those modern high-rises with floor-to-ceiling windows and a rooftop pool. The rent is $2,800 a month. Leased under your name. He finally looked at me, his eyes wide with panic. He sank into a chair opposite me. Beverly, I can explain. Can you? I snapped, the quiet calm finally breaking, replaced by a wave of hot fury. Can you explain how, over the past 6 months, you have moved approximately $18,000 from our joint savings account? The account for our kids' college fund, Sterling. The money for a new roof, for emergencies, for their future. You took their future and you spent it on your secret life. The term college fund hung in the air between us, heavy and obscene. We had started it the week Melody was born. We'd sat at this very table, dreaming about her future, diligently setting up the automatic transfer every month. The thought that he'd stolen from his own children's future to finance his lies made me physically ill. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grip the edge of the table. But that wasn't even the worst of it. The next day, while he was at work, God knows where he actually was, I remembered something. A flicker of a memory from a few months back. A message notification on Facebook from a name I didn't recognize. A message I had seen, read the first line of, and then deliberately ignored, dismissing it as spam or a mistake because I couldn't bear for it to be true. It was from a woman named Blair. With trembling hands, I found it again, buried deep in my message requests folder. Hi Beverly, you don't know me, but I think you need to see this. Your husband, Sterling, and I dated for 3 months. He told me he was separated and going through a difficult divorce. I found out he was lying when I saw his LinkedIn profile. He forgot to change his relationship status from married. My heart pounded as I scrolled down. Attached to the message were screenshots. Dozens of them. Text messages where he told Blair he loved her, that he couldn't wait for his divorce to be final so they could start their life together. Photos of them at some happy hour, his arms slung around her, both of them beaming at the camera. And then, there was a video. A short, grainy clip of Sterling, laughing with a group of his startup friends, a beer in his hand. I pressed play, my breath catching in my throat. I could hear him say, his voice slurring slightly, clear as day, Beverly? She's basically a roommate at this point. Our marriage has been dead for years. It's a business arrangement for the kids. Dead for years. A roommate. A business arrangement. Interesting. Considering we had been intimate just 4 days before Blair sent me those messages. Considering I had planned his big 40th birthday party 6 weeks earlier, inviting his entire team, spending a week secretly organizing it, making his favorite lemon layer cake from scratch, and buying him that ridiculously expensive mechanical keyboard he'd been eyeing for months. I had done all of that for a marriage that was, apparently, already a corpse. I sat there, staring at my phone, the evidence of his profound, calculated deception glowing in the dark of my office. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had erased me. He had rewritten our entire history to suit his narrative, painting me as a cold, unloving roommate to justify his betrayals to his mistresses and to himself. The sheer, breathtaking cruelty of it was a physical weight. But the absolute lowest point, the discovery that changed everything, the one that turned my grief into something much harder and more dangerous, came from my own daughter. That evening, I was tucking Melody into bed. She'd been quiet all day, a little shadow flitting through the house. Her usual bright energy was gone, replaced by a somber watchfulness that broke my heart. I knew something was wrong. I sat on the edge of her bed in the soft glow of her unicorn nightlight and stroked her hair. "What's on your mind, sweet pea?" I asked gently. "You've been so quiet today." She looked at me, her big brown eyes, so much like his, filled with a worry no 8-year-old should ever have to carry. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice so small I could barely hear it. "Am I going to get in trouble?" "Of course not, honey. Why would you ever be in trouble with me?" Her little voice trembled, and she picked at a loose thread on her comforter. "Because I saw Daddy at the mall a few weeks ago, when I went with Emma's mom. He was with a lady. The one with the red hair. Heather." My blood ran cold. The timeline clicked into place. The shopping trip. It was a Tuesday. A day Sterling was working late. "What happened, honey?" I asked, keeping my voice as soft and steady as I could. I went over and said hi, Melody whispered, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. And he looked scared. Like you look when you break a glass. And I asked him who she was. She took a shaky breath. And he told me to keep it our little secret. He knelt down and said, "This is a work friend, sweetie, and Mommy wouldn't understand. So this has to be our special secret, okay? Don't tell Mommy." He said it was important not to tell you. And there it was. The ultimate betrayal. It wasn't about the lies, the money, or the other women anymore. It was this. He had manipulated my beautiful, innocent, 8-year-old daughter. He had burdened her with his sordid, adult affair and forced her to lie to me, her own mother. He had made our child his accomplice. He had taught her that secrets that make you feel bad are okay. That's when I stopped being sad. That's when I stopped being heartbroken. That's when I started getting strategic. The man I married was gone. In his place was a monster, a stranger who would use his own child as a shield. And I was going to take him down. That night, Sterling came home to a scene of perfect, surreal domesticity. The girls had already eaten, and I was serving his plate when he walked in. Grilled salmon, roasted asparagus with lemon. His favorite. He was on edge, a hunted look in his eyes, clearly waiting for the other shoe to drop after my discoveries the night before. But I smiled. I asked him about his day. I didn't mention the apartment, or Blair, or the fact that our 8-year-old daughter was carrying his infidelity like a toxic secret in her little heart. The meal was excruciating. The girls chattered about their day at school. April showed us a drawing of our family, Mommy, Daddy, Melody, and her, all holding hands under a smiling sun. The irony was so painful it was almost funny. After I tucked the girls into bed, reading Goodnight Moon to April while feeling like I was dissociating from my own body, I walked into our bedroom. He was there, pretending to read some tech industry newsletter on his iPad. He looked up when I came in, a nervous energy radiating off him. "So," I said conversationally, as I began to fold a pile of clean laundry from the basket on the floor. "How long were you planning to keep the Pearl District apartment before you officially left us?" He dropped the iPad. Actually dropped it. It hit our hardwood floor with a sickening crack. The same floor we had spent 3 long, sweaty weekends refinishing together 2 years ago, laughing and covered in sawdust. Good. Serves him right. Beverly. I can explain, he stammered, scrambling to pick it up, his hands shaking. The screen was shattered. Can you explain why our joint savings account, the one for the girls' college fund, is missing $18,000? I pressed, my voice still eerily calm as I folded a small t-shirt. His face did that thing guilty people's faces do. The rapid-fire micro-expressions of someone frantically calculating which lie might still work, which story might still save him. Those were business investments. For the startup. A potential promotion was on the line. I had to show I was all in. Try again, I said flatly. I called the bank. The transfers went to a personal account under only your name. An account you opened 18 months ago. Want to guess what else I found? I pulled up my phone and showed him the screenshots Blair had sent me months ago. The ones I had been in denial about, refusing to believe. Your ex-girlfriend Blair was very thorough. She documented everything. Including the part where you told her I was basically dead weight, holding you back from living your authentic life. Portland loves its therapy speak. Everyone here has a therapist and uses words like authentic and emotional labor and holding space. Sterling was fluent in that language. He'd used it to justify his affair to himself, to his mistresses. He'd weaponized the language of healing to rationalize his destruction. He probably told Heather he was finding his truth or some similar, self-serving garbage. I never meant for anyone to get hurt, he started, his voice pleading. You involved Melody, I cut him off. My voice came out flat. Cold. The kind of cold that comes from the Columbia River Gorge winds in January. You made our daughter lie to me. She is 8 years old. She came to you, her father, and asked about seeing you with another woman, and you turned it into a dirty secret that she had to keep from her mother. That one landed. I watched real shame flicker across his face for approximately 2 seconds before the defensiveness kicked in again. I didn't want to disrupt their lives until I figured things out, he protested, his voice rising. Until you figured things out, I repeated, the words tasting like poison in my mouth. And there it was. The explosion he'd been waiting for, the one I'd been holding back. You've been figuring things out for 18 months while I've been raising your children, managing your household, planning your birthday, supporting your career, and apparently playing the role of the unsuspecting, idiotic wife in your pathetic one-man show of a man discovering himself. You are a coward, Sterling. A thief. And a terrible father. Here's the hilarious thing about cheaters. They always think they're the first person in history to have an affair, like they've discovered some revolutionary concept in human relationships. Sterling actually looked surprised, shocked that I was this angry, as if I was being unreasonable for not understanding his precious journey. His journey had a body count, and it started with his own family. The next morning, Friday, September 19th, I did what any rational, clear-headed Portland woman would do. I went to a 7 a.m. yoga class and sweated out some of the rage. Then I went home, showered, and called the most ruthless divorce lawyer in the city. Her name was Lorraine Vance. She had a corner office in the U.S. Bancorp Tower with a panoramic view of Mount Hood and a reputation for making cheating spouses weep openly during depositions. Her consultation fee alone was $750. She was worth every single penny and then some. I sat in her plush leather chair, which probably cost more than my couch, sipping the fancy French press coffee her assistant offered me. And for 1 solid hour, I laid it all out. The affair with Heather. The previous, documented affair with Blair. The secret apartment. The stolen $18,000 I knew about then. And the worst part, the absolute unforgivable part, the manipulation of Melody. I told her everything, my voice never wavering. Lorraine listened intently, taking notes on her iPad with a sleek silver stylus. She didn't interrupt, her expression unreadable. When I finally finished, the whole ugly story hanging in the air of her pristine office, she looked at me, her eyes sharp and intelligent. So, she said, her voice crisp and professional. To summarize, your husband has been conducting serial affairs, systematically embezzling marital funds, and has coerced your minor child into secrecy regarding his infidelity. She looked up at me. Beverly, Oregon is a no-fault divorce state, which means you don't have to prove he did something wrong to get the divorce itself. However, she leaned forward, a predatory gleam in her eye. We can and we will absolutely use this pattern of egregious behavior to argue for favorable terms regarding custody, spousal support, and asset division. His actions show a profound lack of judgment and a moral unfitness, especially concerning your daughter. This isn't just cheating, it's a calculated deception with financial and emotional abuse. She explained it all. The legal jargon suddenly became crystal clear. Parenting time. How his financial dissipation of marital assets, a fancy legal term for stealing our money, would work heavily in my favor. Potential outcomes. Her words were clinical, unemotional, but they were the most comforting words I had heard in weeks. They were the sound of a plan. Of a fight back. I could see she was already formulating a strategy, her mind working 10 steps ahead. She loved cases like this. One more thing, I said before leaving, my resolve hardening with every word she spoke. I want documentation of everything. Every lie he told his girlfriends about being divorced. Every dollar he moved. Every single time he manipulated our daughters. I want it so thoroughly documented that he can't spin this into some mutual growing apart narrative to his family and friends. I want the truth, in black and white, undeniable. Lorraine Vance smiled. It was the smile of a shark spotting blood in the water. Beverly, she said, I'll have my investigators start immediately. We're going to build a fortress of facts. While my fortress was being built, Sterling was busy posting on Instagram from his. He'd officially moved into his Pearl District apartment, the one I wasn't supposed to know about, and was flooding his stories with pictures of his new peaceful life. There were carefully staged photos of himself reading philosophy books on his balcony overlooking the city. Philosophy books. This man hadn't read anything except Reddit threads and tech blogs in our entire marriage. It was all a performance, a desperate attempt to control the narrative, to paint himself as a man on a noble journey of self-discovery rather than a common, garden-variety cheat. His mother, Judith, called me that weekend. Judith, who'd once told me at our wedding that I was exactly the stable influence Sterling needed, now wanted to have a little chat to get his side of the story. He said you two had been having problems for years, Judith said over the phone, her voice dripping with that particular brand of mother-in-law concern that really means, I believe my perfect son's version of events exclusively. He said you'd grown distant. Judith, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Did Sterling happen to mention in his story that he's been having affairs, plural? Or that he's been stealing money from our joint savings account, money intended for your grandchildren's education? Or did he mention that he manipulated your 8-year-old granddaughter into keeping secrets for him about his girlfriend? There was a long, beautiful, awkward silence on the other end of the line. Well, I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding, she finally tried, her voice wavering. There is no misunderstanding, I replied, my patience completely gone. Your son is a documented liar, a thief, and a cheat. I have screenshots, bank records, and soon I will have sworn witness testimonies from his ex-girlfriends. So, with all due respect, Judith, I am not interested in hearing about how I'm not being understanding enough of his needs. And then I did something I'd never done in 11 years. I hung up on her. The click of the phone ending the call was one of the most satisfying sounds I'd ever heard. By the following Monday, the story had spread like wildfire. Portland's a small town pretending to be a big city. Everyone knows everyone through some chain of coffee shops, yoga studios, or kids' schools. Heather, it turned out, was not the quiet, retiring type. She had told her friends, who told their friends, who told our mutual acquaintances about the psycho-married guy from the startup who lied for months about being divorced. Sterling's carefully crafted reputation was becoming a train wreck in real time. His startup bros started avoiding him at networking events. He was conspicuously left off the invite list for the annual Columbia River Gorge hiking trip. Even his favorite bartender at Teardrop Lounge reportedly gave him the side eye. But the real consequence, the one that truly got to him, came from our daughter. Melody stopped talking to him. My 8-year-old daughter, who had worshipped her father, who had been his little shadow every weekend, refused to FaceTime him. When he came for his first scheduled parenting time visit after moving out, she stayed in her room with the door closed and wouldn't come out. I stood in the hallway, my heart breaking for her, as he pleaded through the closed door. "Mel, sweetie? It's Daddy. Please open the door." And I heard my daughter's small, strong voice, clear and unwavering, say, "Why did you make me lie to Mommy?" My friend Emma's parents got divorced, and her dad didn't make her lie. "You said it was our secret." "Secrets aren't supposed to make you feel bad, Daddy." Sterling sat in our living room, well, my living room now, on the edge of the couch, looking like someone had punched him in the soul. He'd never considered this. He'd never considered that his actions had consequences beyond just me finding out. He'd never thought for a single second about how his manipulation would affect his daughter's ability to trust him, her own father. He saw her as an accessory to his life, not a person he was actively harming. "I think you should leave," I told him calmly, standing in the doorway. "Your visit time doesn't mean much if your daughter won't see you." He left, his shoulders slumped in defeat. And for the first time in 6 months, I felt something other than rage or heartbreak. I felt powerful. I felt like I was taking back control. The real plot twist, the one that turned my strong case into an ironclad, nuclear-proof fortress, came on a Wednesday morning in early October. October 8th, to be exact. I was at my desk, trying to find some semblance of normalcy, working on that brewery logo, when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Hi Beverly, this is Heather. I know this is weird, and you have every right to tell me to get lost, but can we talk? I have some information that I think you need to see." My first instinct was to delete it and block the number. My second instinct was to screenshot it and send it to Lorraine. My third instinct, the one I actually followed, was to respond with 5 simple words: Stumptown Coffee. 2 p.m. Full circle, baby. When Heather showed up this time, she looked like a different person. The polished, confident woman from that first encounter was gone. In her place was someone who looked tired and fragile. No power blazer, no perfect makeup. Just jeans, a hoodie, and the haunted look of someone who'd been crying recently. She sat down across from me with a thick manila folder that looked ominous. "I'm not here to apologize," she started, then hesitated, twisting a napkin in her hands. "I mean, I am sorry. Genuinely. For my part in this. I was naive, and I'm sorry for the pain I caused you. But that's not why I asked to meet." "Then why are you here?" I asked, my arms crossed, still wary. She slid the folder across the table. "Because Sterling is not who either of us thought he was. He's a predator. And you deserve to know the whole truth before your divorce proceedings get any messier." I opened the folder. Inside were bank statements. Not for one secret account, but 3. 3 separate accounts I didn't know about, all under his name. The total amount he had squirreled away wasn't $18,000. It was $47,000. Nearly $50,000 of our marital assets, moved systematically in small, hard-to-notice increments over the last 18 months. He'd been planning this for a very, very long time. But that wasn't even the worst part. "He told me he was going to propose," Heather said quietly, looking down at her hands. "He'd been looking at rings. He showed me photos from a jeweler in the Pearl District. He said that once his divorce from his crazy ex-wife was finalized, he wanted to start fresh with me, build the life he'd always wanted. He was talking about marriage, about a future." I stared at her, my mind struggling to process the layers of deceit. "You're telling me he was planning to marry you, while still married to me, using money he stole from our joint accounts, from our children?" "It gets worse," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She pulled out a stack of printed screenshots from a laptop. "I went through his laptop after I found out about you. I know, It was an invasion of privacy, but I had to know. He has a whole folder on his desktop. It's labeled Exit Strategy. My heart stopped. The blood in my veins turned to ice. It has everything, she continued, her eyes welling up with tears. Drafts of legal documents about custody. Articles about asset division in Oregon. A spreadsheet calculating potential child support payments. And this. She pushed a piece of paper towards me. It was a draft of an email to his boss, outlining a proposal to relocate and manage the company's new satellite office. In Seattle. He was planning to move to another state. He was planning to leave, and he was planning to take my children with him. Beverly, she said, finally looking me in the eye, her own pain mirroring mine. You weren't an obstacle he was trying to navigate around. You were a resource. You were a resource he was actively draining before he left for good. The ambient noise of the coffee shop faded into a dull, white roar. Over a year. For over a year, while I had been planning our anniversary trip to Cannon Beach, while I had been supporting him through his endless startup stress, while I had been handling every midnight feeding when April had the flu and every single invisible, thankless task that keeps a household running, he had been meticulously planning his escape. Why are you showing me this? I finally asked, my voice a hoarse whisper. Heather's jaw tightened with a renewed anger. Because he did the same thing to me that he did to you. He used me. He lied to me. He made me complicit in hurting another woman and her children. And when I confronted him yesterday, after our little scene here, about the divorce that apparently never happened, you know what he said? Her voice cracked with fury. He said I was being too demanding and that he needed space to figure things out. The exact same condescending, dismissive garbage line he probably gave you. She wasn't wrong. Plus, she added, delivering the final, almost comical, blow, I found something else. He's been talking to a third woman. Someone named Holly from his cycling group. He has been for at least 2 months. Even while he was supposedly building a future with me. I actually laughed. A real, genuine laugh of disbelief. The sheer, pathological audacity of it all was almost impressive. Sterling had been juggling 3 women like he was training for Cirque du Soleil, all while playing the part of the devoted father on his Instagram and the tortured, soon-to-be divorced man to his mistresses. Thank you, I said finally, tapping the thick folder with my finger. Seriously. Thank you, Heather. This changes everything. After she left, I sat there for 20 minutes, just absorbing the sheer scale of his betrayal. Then I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer. Lorraine, I said, my voice steady and clear as a bell. How fast can you file for an emergency custody modification and a temporary restraining order to prevent him from leaving the state with the children? I could hear the smile in her voice. If you have documentation of financial abuse and concrete evidence he's planning to relocate without notifying the court? Very, very fast. What did you find? I told her everything. The 3 accounts. The Seattle plans. The pattern of serial affairs. The exit strategy folder. I could hear her typing furiously on the other end of the line. I'll have the papers filed with the court by Friday morning, she said, her voice buzzing with energy. We're also going to motion for a full forensic accounting of all his assets. If he's hidden $47,000, there might be more. And Beverly? This exit strategy folder, that is the smoking gun. It shows premeditation. Systematic dissipation of marital assets with intent to defraud. The judge is going to bury him. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in strategic legal warfare. Lorraine brought in a forensic accountant named Malcolm, a quiet, unassuming man who looked like a librarian but had the soul of an IRS auditor on a mission. And Malcolm found everything. It turned out Sterling hadn't just been hiding money in bank accounts. He'd been underreporting his income on our joint tax returns for the past 2 years, taking large contractor payments for his startup separately and not declaring them. This wasn't just a marital issue anymore, this was tax fraud. He'd moved another $12,000 of marital funds into a cryptocurrency wallet, thinking it was untraceable. He was paying for his girlfriend's expenses, dinners, weekend trips, gifts, using our joint credit card, then meticulously categorizing them in our budget software as business meals and client entertainment. The Pearl District apartment was rented under an LLC he'd created 6 months ago without telling me, another attempt to hide assets. The total marital funds misappropriated, once Malcolm was done? Approximately $73,000. In Oregon, that's not just infidelity. That's financial fraud during a marriage. And as Lorraine gleefully reminded me, judges absolutely hate that. But I wasn't done. Armed with a new sense of purpose, I reached out to Blair, his first side piece. She was shocked to hear about Heather and the extent of his lies, and was more than willing to provide a sworn deposition about his pattern of lying about his marital status. Then I did something that felt slightly evil, but absolutely necessary. I joined his cycling group. I found their page on meetup.com, bought a new helmet, and showed up for their Saturday morning ride. I didn't go to confront Holly, I'm not that messy, but simply to observe. And sure enough, there she was. Late 20s, a yoga instructor type, hanging all over Sterling during water breaks. When she posted an Instagram story later that day of morning rides with this amazing human and tagged Sterling in it, I screenshotted it. Evidence of ongoing affairs during divorce proceedings. Check. Lorraine was practically ecstatic. Amidst this storm of legal preparation, I knew I had to do the hardest thing yet. I had to talk to my girls again, to give them a bit more of the truth. I sat down with Melody and April one evening while we were carving pumpkins for Halloween. I kept it age-appropriate, but I didn't sugarcoat it entirely. You know how Daddy doesn't live with us anymore? I began, scooping out pumpkin guts. Well, Daddy made some very big choices that were not honest. He wasn't truthful with me, or with our family. And those choices have consequences. Melody looked up from drawing a face on her pumpkin, her expression serious. Is it because of the lady at the mall? My heart broke a little all over again. That's part of it, honey. A big part of it was that he wasn't being truthful. And in a family, we have to be truthful with each other, even when it's hard. That's how we keep each other safe. April, my 5-year-old philosopher, looked up from her project, her hands covered in pumpkin seeds. Is Daddy in a timeout? Sort of, I said, managing a small smile. A really, really long timeout. While the legal storm raged, I started doing something I'd neglected for years, taking care of myself. I realized I had spent so much of the last decade wrapped up in being a wife and a mother that I had forgotten who Beverly was. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with, the ones who knew me before Sterling. We'd meet for coffee or long walks along the waterfront, and it felt like breathing again after being underwater for years. I joined a book club that met at the famous Powell's bookstore. I even hired a financial advisor, a woman who specialized in helping women through divorce, to help me understand our assets and plan for a future as a single-income household. The idea was terrifying, but also empowering. And I started dating. It felt strange and scary at first. But I didn't do it to find a new husband. I did it to remind myself what it felt like to have a conversation with a man who was actually interested in what I had to say, who asked questions and listened to the answers. One guy, a 4th-grade teacher from April's school named Dean, was particularly sweet. He'd been divorced 3 years earlier after his wife left him, and he understood the chaos and the heartbreak of single parenting. Our dates weren't fancy, just coffee, walks in Laurelhurst Park, visits to food cart pods. It was easy. It was nice. You seem different than when I first met you at the back-to-school night in September, Dean said during one of our coffee dates. You seem lighter. More present. That's what happens when you stop living someone else's lie, I told him, and I was surprised by how true it felt. Of course, in a town as small as Portland, Sterling found out. Someone saw us laughing at a food cart pod in the Hawthorne district. He lost his mind. He started bombarding me with texts, accusing me of moving on too fast and confusing the children. The hypocrisy was so thick you could cut it with a knife. He, the man with a spreadsheet of girlfriends, was accusing me of confusing our children. I texted back a single, simple message: "You're concerned about confusing them?" That's rich, coming from the man who has been with at least 3 different women in the past year. Please direct all future communications to my lawyer, Lorraine Vance. He didn't respond. What could he possibly say? By early November, I had a forensic accounting report showing $73,000 in dissipated and fraudulent assets. I had sworn depositions from 2 ex-girlfriends. I had photographic evidence of ongoing affairs. I had documentation of parental manipulation. And I had a lawyer who was sharpening her knives for trial. Sterling's attorney, some hapless buddy of his from college who clearly specialized in tech startups and not contentious family law, was already sending panicked settlement offers. They wanted to negotiate. They wanted to keep this amicable. Lorraine texted me after receiving their 3rd lowball offer. "They're scared," the text read. "Good," I typed back, a grim satisfaction settling over me. Let them sweat. The preliminary hearing was set for November 14th. It was supposed to be a routine affair, a formality where both sides present their initial positions and the judge sets some temporary orders. Sterling's attorney, his college buddy Todd, who looked like he'd walked straight out of a craft brewery commercial with his perfectly coiffed man bun and vintage flannel, seemed confident and relaxed. He kept whispering to Sterling, probably reassuring him that it was no big deal, that the real work would happen in mediation. They had absolutely no idea what was coming. Lorraine stood up when our case was called. She was a vision of power and competence in her perfectly tailored black suit. She addressed the judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s named Patricia Winters, who was known for having exactly 0 patience for financial shenanigans and family court theatrics. "Your Honor," Lorraine began, her voice ringing with clarity and authority in the quiet courtroom. "This isn't a typical dissolution case. What we have here is a case of systematic financial fraud, parental manipulation, and a documented pattern of deception spanning 18 months. We'd like to submit our forensic accounting report, witness depositions, and evidence of Mr. Sterling's ongoing misconduct during these proceedings." She walked forward and handed the bailiff a binder. It wasn't a small binder. It must have been 3 inches thick, filled with every lie, every stolen dollar, every betrayal, all neatly organized with colored tabs. Sterling's face went pale. Todd's man bun seemed to physically deflate. Judge Winters spent 20 minutes reviewing the documents. 20 silent, excruciating minutes where you could hear every nervous cough, every shuffle of paper, every frantic breath in that courtroom. I didn't look at Sterling, but I could feel his panic radiating across the room. I watched him squirm in his seat, watched him whisper frantically to Todd, watched the slow, dawning realization on his face that he was absolutely, unequivocally screwed. "Mr. Sterling," Judge Winters finally said, looking at him over the top of her reading glasses. Her voice was cold as ice. "It says here," she paused, flipping a page in the binder with a sharp flick of her wrist, "that you've dissipated approximately $73,000 of marital assets. It says you created an LLC without your spouse's knowledge to hide rental payments. It says you have underreported your income on joint tax returns." She paused again, her eyes narrowing. "And it says here that you coerced your 8-year-old daughter into maintaining secrecy about an extramarital affair. Is that correct, Mr. Sterling?" Sterling opened his mouth. A small, croaking sound came out. Nothing else. Todd tried to jump in, his voice suddenly high-pitched. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges some financial irregularities, but..." "Some irregularities?" Judge Winters cut him off, her gaze so withering it could have peeled paint. "Counselor, your client appears to have committed fraud. Fraud against his spouse, fraud against the IRS, and fraud against the integrity of this court by actively attempting to hide assets during dissolution proceedings. Please, sit down." Todd sat down so fast he almost fell out of his chair. She looked back at Sterling, who looked like he might faint. Do you have the $73,000 available to return to the marital estate immediately? Some of it is invested, he mumbled, his voice barely audible. In crypto, and the market's been very volatile. So, you gambled away marital funds? Judge Winters was not amused. Here's what's going to happen. This is a temporary order, effective immediately. Mrs. Barrett retains sole and exclusive possession of the marital home. Mr. Sterling will pay temporary spousal support of $3,000 per month and child support at the presumptive amount based on his last known salary. Parenting time will be professionally supervised, twice a month, pending a full psychological evaluation to address the documented parental manipulation. Todd shot to his feet again. Your Honor, supervised visitation is excessive. Counselor, the judge snapped, not even looking at him. Your client manipulated his 8-year-old daughter into being an accessory to his affair. He is lucky I'm not ordering a full custody evaluation and suspending his visitation entirely today. Furthermore, Mr. Sterling will provide a full and complete accounting of all financial assets, including all cryptocurrency holdings, to Mrs. Barrett's counsel within 14 days. This court will also be referring this matter to the Oregon Department of Revenue for a full review of the tax irregularities noted in the forensic report. And Mr. Sterling, she added, pinning him with her gaze, you are not to relocate more than 50 miles from your current residence without express written approval from this court. We are adjourned. The gavel came down with a deafening crack that echoed through the silent courtroom. Sterling looked like he'd just been hit by a truck, a very expensive, legally binding truck. In the hallway outside the courtroom, I could hear him hissing at his lawyer. You said this would be simple. You said she wouldn't have any evidence. I walked past them with Lorraine, not saying a word, not even glancing in their direction. My silence was more devastating than any gloating I could have done. The fortress of facts had held. And the king of the castle of lies had been brought down. If you are still listening to this, please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below. It lets me know you've given me a like, and it tells me you're here with me on this journey. Your support is a huge encouragement for me. Please, comment the number 1, and then listen as I tell you the rest of my story. The fallout after that hearing was swift and spectacular. Within 24 hours, Sterling's startup board of directors had an emergency meeting. He was asked to step back from his role, effective immediately. It was a polite, corporate way of saying they didn't want their company anywhere near a man who was under investigation by the IRS for tax fraud. His impressive 6-figure salary, the one that had funded his secret life, went from $140,000 a year to zero. His cycling group quietly booted him after Holly, the third woman, found out the details of the hearing through the ever-efficient Portland gossip mill. She posted a long, sanctimonious Instagram story about recognizing red flags and trusting your intuition about toxic people. The irony was delicious. Even his own mother, Judith, finally capitulated. She called me, not to defend him, but to apologize. I didn't know the extent of it, Beverly, she said, and for the first time, I heard genuine remorse in her voice. It was shaking. The things he did, the way he treated Melody. I am so sorry. Please, don't keep me from my granddaughters. Of course not, Judith, I told her, and I meant it. They love you. They aren't pawns in this. Unlike what her own son had made them. The court-ordered spousal and child support, which was now based on his previous high salary, meant that Sterling could no longer afford his fancy Pearl District apartment. He had to move out and find a sad little studio in Gresham, one of Portland's less glamorous, far-flung suburbs. His Instagram stories of finding peace on my balcony turned into complete radio silence. But the real karma, the absolute chef's kiss of it all, came from an unexpected source, his former employer. The company's CFO, a meticulous man I'd met once at a holiday party, was reviewing company finances after Sterling's abrupt exit. He discovered that for years, Sterling had been expensing personal charges to the company credit card. We're talking hundreds of charges. Hotel rooms for his affairs, lavish dinners with his girlfriends, even the jewelry he'd been planning to give Heather, all of it had been fraudulently charged to the company as business development and client entertainment. They filed a civil lawsuit against him for approximately $30,000. So, let's recap. He was now being sued by his former employer while going through a contentious divorce where he owed me $73,000 in dissipated assets, all while being investigated by the IRS. Lorraine actually laughed out loud when I told her the latest news. He's being attacked from all sides, she said, clearly enjoying herself. The court, the IRS, his old company, and his own terrible decisions. It's a thing of beauty. The supervised visitation with Melody and April was painful to watch. A court-appointed supervisor, a kind but firm woman named Margaret, would sit in my living room on a Saturday afternoon while Sterling tried to act like everything was normal. But the girls knew better. Melody, in particular, was not letting him off the hook. "Why did you lie?" she asked him directly during their second visit. Margaret had told the girls that this was a safe space to talk about their feelings, and Melody took that to heart. "So, why did you lie to me and Mommy?" Sterling looked cornered. He glanced at Margaret, who was taking notes. He looked at me, standing in the kitchen doorway. He looked back at his daughter. I made mistakes, sweetheart," he stammered. "Grown-ups make big mistakes sometimes." "But you made me lie, too," Melody interrupted, her little voice unwavering. "You said it was our secret. But secrets aren't supposed to hurt people. That's what you and Mommy always taught me." Out of the mouths of babes. I could see the color drain from Sterling's face. I could practically see Margaret's notes. Father's actions have caused clear emotional distress and confusion regarding core moral values. His chances of getting unsupervised visitation anytime soon were evaporating before his very eyes. April, my 5-year-old chaos agent, was less confrontational but, in her own way, equally devastating. She simply treated him like a polite stranger. She would accept the toy he brought her, say thank you, and then turn to the supervisor and ask, "Can I go play in my room now?" She had completely walled him off. He had become irrelevant to her. For a man with an ego like Sterling's, I suspect that was worse than any anger. By Thanksgiving, which Sterling spent alone in his Gresham studio while the girls and I had a wonderful, peaceful dinner at Judith's house with my parents, the transformation was complete. The man who'd spent 18 months meticulously planning his perfect escape had lost everything. His job. His reputation. His relationship with his daughters. His financial security. And even his mother's unconditional support. Judith was now firmly, and vocally, on Team Beverly. Meanwhile, my life was good. It was better than good. I'd picked up 3 major new design clients through referrals. My work was better than ever, more creative, more inspired. Dean and I were officially dating. We were taking it slow, but it was easy and fun. The girls liked him, which mattered more than anything. My house felt lighter. I had a divorce sale and sold off all of Sterling's ugly, minimalist furniture. Then, Melody, April and I went to thrift stores and flea markets and filled the house with color and warmth and things that made us happy. We repainted his sophisticated gray bedroom a beautiful, sunny yellow. We played music loudly and had spontaneous dance parties in the living room. It was our house now, filled with our joy. The final hearing, scheduled for January 22nd, was anticlimactic in the best possible way. Sterling's new lawyer, Todd, had wisely and hastily referred the case out after the disastrous preliminary hearing, called Lorraine a week before the court date. They wanted to settle. They were waving the white flag. The final settlement agreement was everything Lorraine had promised and more. I got the house, free and clear, with all of its equity. I got primary physical and legal custody of the girls, with Sterling having supervised visitation every other weekend, contingent on his continued therapy. I got 70% of his retirement accounts to offset the assets he'd hidden. I got a judgment for the full reimbursement of the $73,000, payable over 5 years. I got continued spousal support for 4 years and child support until both girls turned 18. He got his clothes, his bike, his now almost worthless cryptocurrency portfolio, and the legal bills from 3 different attorneys. As we walked out of the courthouse on that cold, gray January afternoon after signing the final papers, Sterling called my name in the parking lot. Beverly. I turned, my hand on my car door. Lorraine tensed beside me, ready to intervene, but I gave her a small nod. It was okay. I'm sorry, he said, his voice quiet. For all of it. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am. You're right, I said, my voice not angry, not sad, just factual. It doesn't. But maybe therapy will help you figure out why you blew up your entire life for, what, exactly? A fantasy? An ego boost? The thrill of almost getting away with something? He didn't have an answer. He just stared at the ground. Of course he didn't. Your daughters are amazing, resilient human beings, I continued, my final words to him. And eventually, when you've done enough work on yourself to deserve it, maybe they'll let you back into their lives in a meaningful way. But that will be their choice to make, not yours to demand. You lost the right to demand anything from them the moment you made Melody your accomplice. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove away. I didn't look back. That chapter was closed, signed, and filed with the Multnomah County Court. Life settled into a new normal that felt suspiciously like happiness. Melody made the honor roll. April lost her first tooth and left a note for the tooth fairy that said, "Can I have $5? Inflation is real." Dean and I were taking things slow, but it was real and it was steady. Dinners, weekend hikes with the girls, the occasional overnight when they were at their grandma Judith's house. Nothing rushed, nothing performative. Just easy. One Saturday that spring, I ran into Heather at the farmer's market. She was holding hands with someone new, a woman with kind eyes and paint-stained hands. She smiled when she saw me, a genuine, warm smile. She introduced her partner, Astrid, an artist. They looked happy. "Thank you," Heather said to me quietly as Astrid wandered over to look at some pottery. "For not hating me forever. I know I was complicit, even if I didn't know it. You gave me the evidence that won my case," I reminded her. "And you did the hard work of recognizing you'd been manipulated, too. That takes courage." We stood there for a moment, 2 women who had been linked by one man's deceit, and there was no animosity, only a strange, shared understanding. After they left, April tugged on my hand. "Was that the lady Daddy lied to?" "One of them, yes, honey," I said. "She seems nice now," April said matter-of-factly, taking a big bite of an apple. "People can be wrong and then be better." 5-year-old philosophy. Straight to the heart. Sterling, to his credit, eventually got his supervised visitation lifted after 6 months of intensive therapy and a positive report from the custody evaluator. He was trying. He showed up on time. He stopped making promises he couldn't keep. He started treating the girls like people, not accessories. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. He got a new, less glamorous tech job out in Beaverton. He was paying his support on time. He was, it seemed, finally growing up. As for me, I'm thriving in ways I never knew were possible when I was married. My design business has grown so much that I've actually formed a collective with 3 other creative women in Portland. We're doing branding for some of the city's coolest new businesses, and we're actually profitable. And Dean proposed in June, on a hike to Punch Bowl Falls, with the girls there to witness it. Melody cried happy tears. April immediately asked if she could be a flower unicorn at the wedding instead of a flower girl. We're getting married next spring, a small ceremony in the woods that's about us, not about performance. Sometimes I think about that Thursday afternoon, about that single, random moment I drove past Stumptown Coffee and saw my husband with another woman. I think about how that moment detonated my entire life. But here's the thing I've learned. It didn't destroy me. It freed me. It freed me from a marriage where I had become invisible. It freed me from a partner who saw me as a resource to be drained instead of a person to be cherished. It freed me from the exhausting, soul-crushing performance of pretending everything was fine when it absolutely wasn't. Let me be clear, I'm not grateful for what Sterling did. He was a selfish, weak man who caused tremendous pain to everyone who loved him. But I am grateful for what I discovered about myself in the aftermath. That I am stronger than I ever thought, smarter than I ever gave myself credit for, and absolutely capable of building a beautiful, joyful life from the wreckage of someone else's betrayal. So, if you're listening to this and you're recognizing pieces of your own story in mine, the partner who's always working late, the gut feeling in your stomach that you keep ignoring, the 1,000 tiny betrayals you keep explaining away, please, trust yourself. Trust that feeling. Document everything. Get a good lawyer. And remember that the best revenge isn't rage or bitterness. It's living so well, with so much joy and authenticity, that their terrible choices become their problem, not yours. He spent 18 months planning his perfect exit strategy. I executed my own in 6 weeks. And mine actually worked. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you've been through something similar, or if any of this resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. It's so important for us to know that we're not alone in these struggles. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Be well, and be strong.